So if we want to have really strong relationships personally and professionally, we need something that I call extended rapport. Extended rapport basically is three things. Number one, we like the other person, they like us. Number two, we are like the other person and they are like us. So there's that feeling of commonality. And number three, we want to be like the other person in some way and they want to be like us, which means that we admire some qualities, some characteristics, and vice versa. So where we like them, we are like them, we want to be like them, and vice versa. They like us, they are like us, and they want to be like us in some way. When I say be like somebody, I don't mean like be them, but you admire some quality, some characteristics that you feel are actually beneficial for you guys to synergistically grow together. Because fundamentally, when you have that rapport, the synergy is present so the relationship can grow. So let's break this down as it relates personally and professionally. Professionally, this is going to make a big difference as far as deal sizes are concerned. So if you're in sales, if you're a business owner and your deals are a few thousand, maybe up to like 10,000, maybe a little bit more, then that level of rapport is not going to be the extent of that rapport is going to be a little bit less if the deal sizes, say, for example, are in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands and beyond. So let's talk about how it applies personally and professionally because I want to make sure that I marry the two so that way when you go forward and you use this either in your own personal relationships, establishing friendships, establishing, maybe a network of people that you feel would be helpful in your professional life or in your community life, and if you want to make more money, then you can use this concept and then use it moving forward. So I basically specify a couple of things here that I want to delineate. Number one, rapport building, keep this in mind, with anybody is not a stage or a phase, which means it's not something that you do in the moment, one time, and then it's pretty much over. That's not how it works. Think about when you haven't spoken to a friend in a long time. Usually, what you do if you haven't spoken to your friend in a long time, like a few weeks, a few months, or whatever the case is that you'll do a catch up. You catch up with how things have been going on. You do normal things that normal people do, right? Same with your client, right? If you're meeting your client, let's say, for example, once a week, how's the week been going? What's new? Et cetera, right? Oh, my kid went to the game and et cetera, whatever they're going to say. But the point is that you need this level of rapport every time you're engaging with somebody. Listen, unless you're speaking to somebody every day, then the rapport basically has its own momentum. And there's not enough time that passes for you to do like a catch up with the other person. So it's not a stage or a phase, it's ongoing throughout the entire relationship as long as it lasts. Keep that in mind. So it's a thread that runs throughout the entire relationship to create a feeling of connectedness between you and the other person, right? Rapport connects you with the other person. A lot of people think rapport is you're chit chatting and then you get what you want. If you're purely instrumental in building rapport and you just want to use it to just kind of get what you want and then move on, this is not the channel for you. So you should go elsewhere. So let's continue here. Rapport will also determine and how you build rapport will determine how the other person perceives you, whether they believe you're trustworthy, and if they feel comfortable and safe enough with you to eventually get personal, right? Because when we talk about relationships, of course, we want to have relationships that are growth oriented, and where we can both contribute to each other's existence and evolution, right? We all have relationships for different reasons, but rapport is very critical. Now, as it relates to business, this is going to be very important. Business, sales, closing deals, etc., is that eventually when they do start getting personal, they're going to get more vulnerable with you. And this is where buying decisions are typically made, which means that if you keep things purely at the logical level and you don't go beneath that, right? Connect with their heart, connect with them socially, you're never going to get to the point where they feel instinctively or intuitively aligned with you and what it is that you're doing. They feel like it's a good decision. That's why a lot of the business meetings, when I was handling government contracts, we're talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. These meetings, there'd be like many meetings, right? Many emails, many meetings, because when we're talking about deals that size, you see a lot of this stuff on the internet about reports 2 minutes long and then you close the deal. I mean, that probably can work in some cases, not all cases, and it's not the best approach. For the record, I could talk about in another video about how to build rapport with a person, but that might work for like a few $1,000s, right? A product or service that's a few $1,000s, but when we're talking about very large deal sizes, that's not going to work. So you want to basically apply the principle, any principle at the very highest level, and then apply it all the way down. You don't want to just minimally do something and then think it's going to apply for the things that are higher, because that's not how things work, right? There's always, it starts from the top and it goes to the bottom, right? Or it starts from the root and then it goes up, whatever analogy that you want to use here. So that's where the buying decision is made, right? When a person gets vulnerable with you after they feel comfortable and safe with you, that rapport is being built and they're starting to get personal with you. They feel like, especially if you actually are trustworthy, you have integrity, you have a good product or service, that they're going to make what they're going to want to make that decision. And remember, when we talk about personal relationships, you are the product, right? You are the product, the service, right? Because ideally you want to be a servant. You want to be able to serve other people, right? You're not here to take. When we see the example of all of the, like the leaders of the world, even we go back far enough in time, we see that service, generosity, giving is really one of the highest virtues that you could possibly attain. So that's the mindset that you want to come from, is that you are of service to other people. So for a person's walls to be able to come down, because usually people do have walls, you're going to meet a variety of people. And again, depending on the nature of the relationship, typically you might not work too hard, and you shouldn't work too hard to establish just a friendship with somebody if you feel like you have to try really hard to get their walls down, because there's no automatic resonance there. So that's typically not how friendships are established. Now, unless you're aspiring to possess certain character traits and virtues and you're willing to learn from somebody and humble yourself, that's a little bit of a different story. But when we're talking about business, oftentimes the business, the fact that you're having a business connection is preceding the person, which means that you're aware of them as a company, or you're aware of the product or service. And then as you go out and seek different solutions, those solutions are attached to people, which means that as you're seeking out, okay, I need this product, this specific product, or this specific service. So you go out and start seeking, and then you meet different people who are going to represent that product or service. And then you have to establish a relationship with that person. So in that case, you don't have the luxury, let's say, of just being able to say, you know what, I don't resonate with this person, let me just move on. So let's talk about this. So for a person's walls to come down and stay down, it won't happen with a simple phrase or a question that we're often taught, especially in sales. It's going to require an ongoing relationship of trust and commonality that isn't broken. It's not broken. So you can probably remember a time when you were speaking with somebody and they or you became vulnerable for a moment, and then you miscalibrated a question or a statement, or they did, and all of a sudden, walls come up. We've all probably had this experience, right? Where either position, where you feel like you're in rapport with somebody, and then you say something that's like not very tasteful, or you ask an inappropriate question or something and their walls come up. Or even you are on the receiving end of that, where you felt comfortable with somebody and then they did something to make you feel uncomfortable, and all of a sudden, bang, walls come up again. So, and then they withdraw or you withdraw. And then that process is essentially, it's sabotaged, or not necessarily sabotaged, because probably that wasn't intentional, but it didn't help, right? It didn't help move the process along. So when a person withdraws, they're less open to your influence and less likely to voluntarily reveal information about themselves. And in a sales context, we actually need this to create that connection and trust, because if they don't voluntarily reveal that information, we're not really going to get to the root of the problem, the root of the pain, the root of their desire, like why they want what they want, and they're not going to be receptive to our solution. So remember that you have to be calibrated in that context, and that comes as a result of you knowing your avatar, right? So that your prospect, if you will, your prospect, your avatar, different personality types, and knowing how to adjust accordingly. So remember that they're not with you to buy. When we're talking about professional relationships, they're not with you to buy a product or service based on its functionality or features, because if that was the case, they wouldn't need a human being. They would just go to a computer, they would just type in product, service. Like people would just have websites where they would have all the products and service listed, and nobody would ever meet face to face to do like business deals. But of course, the deals need to be done, which means you have to shake hands with somebody, or you have to see somebody over Zoom. You have to analyze their body language, their facial expressions, the words, their tones, and all this stuff. So that's really important, is that you remember that it's, of course, your product can't be low quality. It has to be a high quality product. And typically having a very high quality product, having a fantastic offer will do a lot of the heavy lifting, but you still have to be able to relate to the other person, because you never know who you're going to be speaking to. And even people that are technically oriented, if you only relate with them on a technical level, then they're just going to maybe shop around, not come back to you. Like, who knows what's going to happen? Because remember that even though there are different personality types, fundamentally, fundamentally, we're all human beings. So we all need the same things. We were not initially logical beings, especially if you look at children. They're not logical and rational. They act based off of their impulses and their emotions. It doesn't mean that we have to be emotional or impulsive, but we have to understand that we do we do behave that way. We do behave impulsively, instinctively, emotionally, because that is what develops first, right? So when we talk about the brain developing, the rational part, the logical part of the brain develops last, which means we have to go even deeper. So in order to achieve the best rapport, and the example I give here is just think about two scenarios where you have two different businesses and they offer the same thing. And your experience with business A is one where like the person was kind of a bit strange, off-putting, a little confusing. And then with business B, person was, friendly, outgoing. You felt like there was a great connection there. You felt like there was rapport there. Like I talked about, you're more likely to go with business B if you feel like, okay, based off of everything that I'm seeing on the surface, it's basically the same thing, right? We know what option you're going to go for. So in order to achieve the best rapport with your prospect, you need to do three things. Now, this is going to apply even to any other type of relationship. So when we're talking about friendships of any kind, relationships, even relationships like romantic relationships, the same thing is going to apply here. So let me kind of break it down. So you need to do three things. First, you have to create common ground. So like I said, common ground is what? Right? That they are like you, that they like you, that they want to be like you, or they admire you in some way, which means that's why people talk about personal development so often, is because personal development has to do with developing you before you go out seeking from the world what you can take so that you can be fulfilled and validated and have that gap or that emptiness filled with something external. Because if you don't give it to yourself, if you're not able to self-generate a lot of these feelings or these insights or this feeling of peace, for example, that you're connected, that you're safe, that you're taken care of, that you're protected, for example, and you're internally confident, right? It's not something that if you don't possess these things, or you don't have some degree of an internal locus of control, then other people are going to be able to sense that, and they're going to see that you just want to take, that you just want to hopefully have somebody to give you what you need so you can feel validated emotionally, physically, financially, or whatever the case is. So remember that if you put the cart before the horse, you're not going to get anywhere. So make sure that you're taking care of this temple, right? Your mind, your body, your spirit. Make sure you're taking care of the temple, because fundamentally, people come to the temple, right? Which means that you want to be able to attract the right people to your temple. And the only way you're going to do that actually is if you make sure that you're taking care of that temple and then doing the right things that are a reflection of what you've been cultivating. Right? That's the other thing, is that what you do internally is a reflection typically of what you do externally. And vice versa can sometimes apply as well, which means if you're doing the right things and you have the right perspective about the things that you're doing, you're going to change internally. But you always have to have that internal component. If you do not have that, the change will never be strong enough. It will never be integrated. It will never crystallize in some meaningful way. So that's what we have to establish, the common ground. Like I said, likability, that you like them, they like you. You are like them, they are like you in some way. And you want to be like them, they want to be like you in some way. Like I said, characteristics, qualities and things like values, virtues, etc. Second, be aware of your body language and what that may be communicating to the other person. So if I write here, if you're stiff or rigid, if you're not using your face or your hands, right? Because sometimes somebody's smiling and laughing and you're like, that's not really going to go over well, right? So it's not like you have to be a puppet. That's not what we're saying here. But you have to be able to relate to somebody on a level where you're not communicating anything kind of like strange or like, you know what I mean? Or whatever, anything weird. So I did a bunch of weird stuff there. So you can kind of see my point. But sometimes these things can be even more subtle, right? You can make even more subtle gestures that you might not even be aware of. That's why it's really helpful when we talk about professional athletes having coaches, because even the people, the athletes at the highest level, the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, they had coaches, right? And so we're no different, right? We need coaches. We need people to be able to keep us in check. So not mirroring words or expressions, it feels to the other person that you're foreign to them, right? So that's violating the common ground. That's violating principle of rapport, which is that you are like the other person. So that lack of commonality will create a feeling of disconnection. And actually, I did some research here. The more that people are in rapport, the more their body language, their speaking, and even their breathing and expressions become alike. And like I said, it can work in reverse. So it's not like you have to pray, like hope and pray that these things are going to be there, but you can just kind of see the other person. Like if the other person seems a little bit more withdrawn, don't close the space, don't close the gap. Some people are close talkers. You can come in, like you could put an arm around them, because typically people like who like to be up close to you and like smile and look at you, they're going to be open to a receptive, tap on the back or something, or like a little, one of these or something. So you have to be able to read people and then act accordingly. So that this is kind of more of this will take some time to develop. It's a little bit more intuitive, but it is trainable. It is trainable, but it's going to take a lot of reps and a lot of observation and a lot of correction, feedback. So third, so yeah, like I said, doesn't need to act like a puppet, but you have to be engaged and in tune with them to show them that you actually care about them instead of pretending that you care. And some simple things here is that easy way to do that is simply do things like affirm them when they speak, right? You nod when they nod, or they're talking and you're nodding, right? Repeat their words back to them. Relax your breathing. And that way you can become more aware of the other signals that they're giving you. Because if you're not relaxed internally and you're in a state of anxiety, like you're in a fight or flight state, it's going to be extremely difficult and very unlikely that you're going to be able to build a real sense of rapport. Because the only reason that you're in fight or flight mode is because you want something, right? Or you don't want something. And now you've basically objectified the other person as far as what they can give you or what you can take. So third, be empathetic, which means the position of active listening that you're taking is not designed to take control of the conversation, but you're just focusing on understanding their feelings, their experiences, and their goals. Here's the thing. People talk about empathy all the time. They never explain why it's important. The reason why this is important is because you literally, by being empathetic, as far as like the level of empathy, you can actually literally, for a moment, I'm hesitant to say become them, right? But for a moment, you can just, in a sense, become them, right? Just sit in their experience. And by doing that, then it's almost like you're thinking how they're thinking, you're feeling what they're feeling. You're understanding their goals the way they understand their goals. So that way, you know how they feel, right? You know exactly what it is that they need. Because if you take their perspective, and then you also have the perspective of being able to offer something, like let's say, for example, your product, your service, whatever your solution, you're doing a business deal and you know that you have something of value, then you can properly position that as it relates to the other person's needs. That's the point, right? So, and also that's the point in that context. But by being empathetic, you can also help the other person, because when we're talking about business deals or even friendships, romantic relationships, you can help them because they're demonstrating to you something right? The only reason we're communicating is because we want to be able to relate with the other person in some capacity. And that's going to go, we can go into a deep rabbit hole there, so we're not going to get into that. But the point here is that when you understand the other person, you're going to, I'm writing here, you're going to be able to start asking insightful questions. You're going to be properly able to summarize their answers in a way where they're like, yes, exactly. That's exactly it. You want to be able to understand them and their problem better than they understand themselves and their problem. Because if they tell you something like, exactly, that's exactly it, and they feel understood, that feeling of connection is something that in that moment, it's very hard to break, to feel that level of connection with somebody. I was having this conversation with my friend. Yes, I was having a conversation with my friend yesterday, and he summarized something about me that I didn't expect him to understand. And I said, "How did you know that? How did you know that that's how I felt?" And it felt like supernatural in a way. It felt like there was a real connection that's intangible. So when you start creating those intangible connections, soul to soul connections, you know that's the beginning of a great friendship. It's the beginning of a great, even potentially romantic relationship. The beginning of a great business relationship. So, and again, when we're talking about business and closing deals, this is just one component, but it's the most critical component, because if you're a robot and you say all the right things, nobody cares. So that's why this is the human element of interacting. So, where were we? So you're just focusing on understanding their feelings, their experiences, and goals. The best way to do this initially is by just getting curious about their life, their problems, and their desires. And you're temporarily removing your sales cap or your business cap, and you're just getting inside their experience of life. You want to feel what they feel, think what they think. Then what you can do after this, once you start getting the insights, is that you're putting the picture together. You're putting all the pieces together. It's kind of like a puzzle, right? Especially when you're doing a deal, it's kind of like a puzzle. Whether the deal is happening over the course of an hour, over the course of a month, over the course of a few months, depending on the size of the deal, you're putting together the picture, right? The picture. And again, the picture needs to harmonize. So it's like you have their picture, but also you have your picture. So you want, based off of their picture, for your picture to be in harmony with that. It's like when you have two paintings side by side, or you've seen those paintings where there's like a series. It's like a series. There's painting one, painting two, painting three, and they're all kind of connected. So you want to be that like logical continuation of their picture, right? Of their vision. So then you begin putting the picture together and regarding their problems and goals, and then slowly positioning how your solution can solve them if it can, right? Because if you can't help them, if the relationship is not going to be, the business relationship is not going to be mutually beneficial, then that's then reassessment time. It's time to reassess. Remember, if a person doesn't feel understood by you, the listener, they will assume that anything you say, especially proposing a solution, this is key, is actually irrelevant to them, because they believe that you don't truly know who they are and therefore what they want and don't want. I'm going to say that again. Pay close attention. If a person doesn't feel understood by you, the listener, they will assume that anything you say, especially proposing a solution, right, which is your solution, is actually irrelevant to them, because they believe you don't truly know who they are and therefore what they want, what they need, and what they don't want, what they don't need. So remember, buying decisions are made when we go into our feelings and desires about what we're considering as a solution. Make sure that's aligned with everything logically. So logically, everything has to make sense. And that's kind of a different video for a different day. That means that we have to humanize the interaction. We have to humanize everything that we do. And for that, rapport is number one. So I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to leave it there because I think I'm going for quite some time. If you like it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. It always helps the channel. And that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. In the meantime, I'll see you soon.